Instagram. Hello, everybody on Instagram. And now I'm also live on YouTube as well. So hello, everybody. Good morning. Happy Monday. So I've got 2 live streams set up today. So I'm going to be sort of toggling between 2 screens. So I've got you guys here on Instagram on my phone, on one of my phones, and then I've got another set up here, which is YouTube. So hello to everybody on YouTube. So let's get into it. So turning up the dial on your intuition. That is the topic that I want to talk about today. And it's a topic that has been coming up a lot for me recently. And so I really want to help you guys to start understanding what your intuition is and start learning to form a relationship with it and start being able to tap into it more often so that you can follow that inspiration, you can follow that voice, and you can start to trust in it and allow it to guide you to the places that you want to go, so that you can manifest, you can call in the things into your life that you want to start experiencing. And when you start to tap into your intuition, that is when you start to enjoy the journey. I did a whole YouTube video about this a couple of weeks back, about one of the reasons why we really struggle to enjoy the journey of life and we go for the destination instead is because we don't tap into our intuition. Like, if we were to tap into our guidance system, into what that inner voice is saying, then the journey would be so much more enjoyable. And we would then want the journey more so than we do the destination. But because we don't tap into our intuition enough, we end up just craving the destination and we struggle to enjoy the journey. So let me know if you've got any questions. So as we go along, if there's anything that you want to understand more of, if there's something that you need more clarity on, then just drop your questions into the chat boxes and I will try and see if I can get to them in the live as well. And if not, if you're watching this on the replay, then still drop those comments in because I will get back to them at a later date. I will get back to them after the live and respond to you in the chats. So let's start this off then. So what does intuition actually mean? So what I mean by when I talk about intuition is it's a process that allows us to tap into the non-physical part of us. So it's the part of our being that is residing in a non-physical realm. It's some people like to call it their soul, it's their spirit, it's their inner self, it's their higher self, inner being, that kind of thing. And it's the part of us that is always connected to that higher power. So some like to call that source energy, some like to call that God, the universe, the divine, but it's whatever your interpretation is of a higher source, a higher power. And really, it's the part of us that can see everything from a much broader perspective. And this is one of the main reasons as to why we want to tap into it. Because what we do, what I really like is Jeffrey Allen. He's an amazing energy teacher, and he talks about defining that we have a body mind. It's like we have a physical mind because we're in this physical body. And so we have this like kind of physical mind that comes with it, but we also have a spirit body. And there's nothing wrong with like either of them. It's just each one of those provides us with a different perspective. And so what I like to see it is like the physical, the body mind is the one that's got the slightly more narrow view. It really can't see too much beyond what it is currently physically observing. Whereas the spirit mind, which is where the intuition comes in, it's our inner self, higher being, whatever it is you want to call it. It is that part of us that can see from the broader perspective. And so this is why we want to tap into it, because it is this message, it is this perspective that is going to enable us to receive that inspired inspiration so that we can take inspired action. And when we take the inspired action, that is then what leads us to bringing in the experiences, calling in the desires that we want into our reality. So this is why we want to start tapping into that intuition. So one of the first things that I want to talk about that I think is a bit of a myth that I think we need to bust early on. And that is that intuition, certainly from my experience, does not have to come to you when you are in a high vibration. So it doesn't just come to you when you're really happy and really joyful and really grateful. Think of those moments, and I'm sure we've all had them in our lives. Think of those moments where we've hit rock bottom, where we have literally got to the point of, in some way, shape, or form, whether you've called it that, almost praying for, just something bigger than me. Just give me guidance, give me some piece of advice. Now, in that moment, you are not in a high vibration. You are not sat there excitedly bouncing off the walls with joy. And so what we need to understand is that intuition actually comes when our resistance is low. And our resistance can be low when we are in a high vibration or low vibration. It tends to be a lot less, almost completely non-resistant when we are in a high vibration. The two kind of go hand in hand. But you can have your resistance lowered when you're in a lower vibration. Because, as I'm sure we've all experienced, in those moments where we kind of hit rock bottom, we do get that voice come through. Something can filter its way through to us. And what has happened when we hit those rock bottom moments is it's like we give up, but actually in giving up, what we're doing is we're letting go. And that is what is very much connected with intuition, is this process of letting go. Because when we let go, that's when we can allow in. And so in those rock bottom moments, what is happening is you are saying, I can't do this anymore. Like, someone help me. Like, I release control. Give me guidance. And it is that releasing of that resistance, that tight control on our reality, that lets that voice come to us. So don't think that you have to always be in this really high vibing place to receive your intuition. And actually, when I was meditating at the weekend, I noticed, and I was getting like a download, I was sort of channeling like a message through to myself. And what I noticed was I was kind of checking what was my emotion, what was my emotional set point at the time. And it wasn't feeling really expansive and really grateful and really abundant and all of those kinds of things that are associated with the high vibration. I wasn't feeling miserable, I wasn't feeling sad, but I was in a very neutral place. I was in this very open space where I wasn't really feeling one thing or another. I was just in a sort of state of allowing. So let's just try and remove this idea that we have to be constantly in a high vibration. Now, of course, being in a high vibration, you will receive it as well, but you don't have to be in that state in order for your intuition to come through. And so what we need to start doing is we need to start learning how to discern the voice of intuition. Because like I sort of mentioned at the start of this video, is that there's two sort of different minds that we've got. There's like the body mind, the physical mind, and then there's the spirit mind. There's that mind of intuition that's coming from a higher source, a higher perspective. And so what we need to start doing in order to tap into our intuition is we want to start learning how to differentiate between those two voices. And this can be quite tricky in the beginning. It really is a practice of just keeping yourself tuned in, looking for those really small differences, those slight nuances. So for me, what I find is, so my intuition comes to me very much from a voice in my head. That's how I receive intuition. But there are lots of different other ways that you can receive it. It's very much personal preference. But to me, when I get that voice come into my head, I notice that when it's my voice, when it's kind of my body voice, my physical mind thinking, I notice that the voice is very close to my mouth. And sometimes I will even feel my mouth sort of moving slightly to make the sound of those words. Whereas when it's my voice of intuition, it's like that voice can be heard further back. It's like back here. It's not very like at the forefront here. And so that's how for me, I know which voice is coming through. And another thing about that voice, and certainly from my own practice, is to me that voice feels godlike. And what I mean by that is I like to think of like the Greek gods, the Roman gods, or any kind of archetype, any god really in any religion, any culture around the world. When we describe a god, an archetype, that person, that persona, that individual is very clear. They're very concise. They are very, it's like this confidence, this knowing that comes through. And so that is what I feel when my intuition starts to come through, when I hear that voice. It is very concise. It doesn't sort of go, oh, it's this, no, maybe it's this. Like it's that. And there's no questioning it kind of thing. And so it's about starting to like notice these differences so that, and almost you can put characters on them if that helps. Like I'm pretty sure that's why a lot of things like, those sorts of gods were created back in those different cultures, in those different times, because it sometimes helps to give it a more physical element. Because sometimes when we talk about spirit mind, when we talk about intuition, when we talk about connecting to that non-physical part of us, it can be quite difficult to put it into words because it really is something that is not actually existing in this physical realm. It's something that is happening in the non-physical realm. And so it helps us to try, it's not always easy, but try to give it a physical feeling, a physical element. And that's a really useful tool in the beginning, because the more and more you get used to it, then it's going to become like driving a car where you just don't even think about it. You just know, like, you don't have to think, you just drive. But in the beginning, you have to kind of separate the two, and you have to start being able to pick out how you separate the two. And the other thing that I want to talk about, what that voice sounds like as well, is that voice, another way to know that it is your intuition, is that voice is always coming from a place of love. It is always coming from a place of knowing your self-worth. If you ever hear that voice start to put you down or question, it's not question you, but question your abilities, you know that is your body kind of voice coming in. That is the voice of doubt. That is, that analytical mind that's starting to come in. That voice of intuition will never put you down. It is always coming from a place of love. But the thing to watch out for with that is sometimes it's quite firm love. So for example, when I was getting my download at the weekend, the voice that was coming through, so I was asking it about an experience that I had last week and what I could have done differently and how I can move forward with that. And the voice it wasn't putting me down. It wasn't telling me that I was wrong, that I did anything wrong, but it's kind of like hard love. So sometimes it's a bit like, oh, I don't know if I wanted to hear that, but it's coming from this place of, for your highest, your best possible self. It is supporting you, and it's like sometimes you don't always want to hear that, but it really is for, it's for the best. So start to really become conscious of what that voice sounds like in your head, because that's when you can start to discern between the two voices. Because I know I put out a reel a little while back and somebody commented on that saying, sort of talking around how it's about really making sure that you are following the voice of intuition and not that other voice that creeps in. And I think sometimes that can put a lot of people off because they do get worried, well, I don't want to tap into like the wrong voice. Well, and really, I don't think you can ever tap into the wrong voice because nothing is ever really wrong. It's really only ever our perception of that. But if you want to start, I mean, obviously we want to start getting into that non-physical voice. We want to start getting into that spirit voice because ultimately that is the voice that is going to be guiding us. That is the voice that is going to lead us down the best possible path. But if you do happen to mistake it for your kind of physical body voice, then it's just a lesson to be learned. It's just another piece of contrast that you can add into the mix that is going to give you another desire. Okay, so don't beat yourself up about that. And so what we want to start doing is, like I alluded to earlier, intuition comes to us in different ways. So for me, it is very much a voice in my head. But there are lots of other different ways that people receive intuition, and they kind of have this sense of knowing. So for some people, it might be physical things in their environment. It might be things like synchronicity, seeing numbers, seeing signs, and it's like it's conveying a message to them. It could be like turning on the radio and then you hear a particular song and the lyrics of that song is trying to tell you something and you just know that that song was like meant for you. It could be obviously through a voice in your head. It could be through images that you see in your mind. So if you sit and meditate, you might not necessarily get the voice, but you might see like whole images in your mind. And you could also have a complete mix of all of those. Everybody is completely different. And it's about finding what is your preference. How do you enjoy receiving that intuition? Because actually when it comes through, it's a really fun process. It's like, it's like getting to have this conversation with this higher part of you, this part of you that can like see everything and like knows everything. Like that's a pretty cool thing to be tapping into and doing. And it's about finding which way is enjoyable. And then once you have found the path that it flows to you most easily, then that is when you can start to build your spiritual practice around it. So a lot of, people, we talk about having a morning routine. We have something that is going to help start the day, that is going to set our intentions for the day, get our point of attraction right, get our focus in the place that we want to, start raising our vibration. Now, when you start to learn more about your intuition, you can become more intentional about what that spiritual practice is based on your intuition. And sometimes it will kind of just like naturally fall that way anyway. You'll be naturally pulled towards certain practices that just seem to enhance your intuition anyway. You might not need to purposely add any conscious thought to it. But if you do, so for example, one of the reasons why I journal and I enjoy journaling is because the voice starts to come through in what I write. And sometimes it comes too quickly that I can't keep up with it writing it. So then when that happens, I kind of close my eyes and sort of meditate, but just go into that quieter space where I can allow it to come through quickly. And so if you're somebody who gets a lot of physical indications in your environment around you, one of the practices that you might want to include is going for a morning walk. Get yourself out into an environment where you start to bring in those physical synchronicities, if that's how you receive intuition. Or obviously something like a meditation practice is going to be another way that you can start to tap into it. But it's about finding what works for you and really amplifying that and really, getting into a practice of training yourself into that. So let me know if you've got any questions around this. What is your preference? How do you like to receive intuition when it comes to you? What is the way that you find most easiest, that you enjoy? Let me know in the comments, because everybody's different. And it's really interesting to hear about all those different modalities and different ways in which it can come to each different individual. And so what we want to do then is we want to then start building up our trust in intuition. Because for a lot of people, like I mentioned before, it's about building up your trust in the fact that this voice that you hear, or however it is that you receive that download to you, is actually on your side. It is actually benefiting you. Like, you need to give yourself evidence as to why you should keep tuning into that voice, why you should keep looking to follow its guidance. And the best way to do that, it kind of sounds a bit, it's not that special, but the best way to do that is just to practice it. It's just to say, I'm going to take today and I'm going to follow that voice for as long as I can. And what will happen is that voice is going to push you. That voice, or however you receive your intuition, that those nudges are going to push you, because it's going to take you out of your comfort zone. It's going to make you think, what on earth? Why would I do that? It's going to make you question, but it's about your commitment to following it. And so if you can only follow it for 5 minutes one day, then that's your limit. But try the next day to see if you can follow it that bit longer and that bit longer. And it's about building up your evidence base to say, actually, I remember last time I got this intuitive download, this piece of intuition came to me and I followed it. And, this happened as a result of it. So it's about building up that evidence base, that following that guidance does actually lead you to a much more enjoyable path towards experiencing all the things that you want to experience in your life. And so we want to build up the trust in it. But the other thing that we need to remember, and what can be really hard about building up the trust in your intuition, is that your results aren't always instant. And so I'm just going to give you a little story of something that happened to me last week to explain this. So I came back home. I just picked up my girls from school and I came back home, and in our front garden, I had some plant pots that were lined up and they were quite near the wall. They were just like spare plant pots, they were empty. And we've had a lot of rain here in Wales at the moment. And so our guttering has been kind of overloaded with water. And something said to me when I walked into the front garden to move this metal plant pot that we had. And I was just like, oh, I can't be bothered. I'm not doing it. I didn't really think much of it. I just ignored it really. And then went inside and carried on about my day. Completely forgot about it. That night when I went to bed, I've been having like our windows on the latch slightly, although it's colder here, like it's nice to get some fresh air in. And so I was laying in bed. I got all nice and warm, everything, like the house was all turned off. I was ready to go to sleep. I was nice and warm in my bed. And then what do I hear outside the window? Because it started to rain. And because of the guttering, like struggling a little bit with the amount of rain that we're having at the moment, all I heard was like ping, ping, drip, drip on this metal pot. And that was what my intuition was trying to tell me. Move the metal pot so that you don't end up going into bed and just hearing this drip, drip, drip on this metal pot all night. And it was quite funny, actually. I just laid in bed and I was like, I remember hearing that voice tell me to move that pot, and I didn't move it. And the reason I didn't move it was because at the time I thought, oh, why do I need to move this pot? What has this got to do with anything? And so the feedback is not always instant. And that is why it can be quite difficult sometimes to trust it, because I could have followed that guidance and moved the pot and then been like, why do I need to move the pot? It wouldn't have shown up instantly to give me the reasons as to why I was being told to move it. But what I want to talk about on that point as well, and I was listening to this really interesting Abraham Hicks talk about this, was that even though I decided not to follow my intuition and move the metal pot, and yes, I was laying in bed thinking, how am I going to get to sleep? Because all I can hear is this like drip, drip on this metal pot outside. And that was like, once you pick up on a sound like that, it's like you can't drown it out. So that was all I could hear. But what she was saying when I was listening to a talk that she was giving about intuition was that if you don't follow it, it does not matter, because the beauty of this universe, the beauty of this reality that we live in, is that you can always choose the path you want at any moment. So yes, I decided to ignore the nudge that I was given to move that metal pot. But what I could have done, and I think actually I did end up doing that, because I was laying in bed and I was like, there is no way I'm getting out of this warm bed, going down, turning all the house on, going outside in the rain to move that metal pot. It just was not happening. So I had to pick a different path at that point. I was then given this choice. And it wasn't to beat myself up about the fact that I didn't listen to it. It was, okay, now this is what is in front of me. So what can I do with this? Because at any moment, any second throughout the day, any moment, you always have a choice of where you place your focus. You can pick up, and Abraham Hicks talks about this, you pick up the stick and you've got two ends of it. You pick up a situation, you're faced with a situation, and you've got two possibilities. You can go down the negative route or you can go down the positive route. There is kind of an in-betweeny, but really you kind of have two paths that you can start to go down. Obviously, you can go down them to varying degrees, but really you are either going like up the stream or you're going down the stream. Those are your options. And so with the dripping on the pot, it was like, okay, well, maybe this could be almost like a way to meditate myself to sleep, because the rain was quite consistent and the dripping was quite consistent. So it was sort of creating almost a meditative, like dripping sound. It gave me a focus to quieten my mind. And as it turns out, I did do that. And I fell asleep quite quickly, actually. So I initially thought, I'm going to be awake all night just listening to this pot. And then beating myself up that I didn't move the blooming pot in the first place. So even if you don't follow those nudges, it does not matter, because what you can do is, if you find yourself in a place where you've very clearly had that realization that there was a nudge for you to do something and you didn't do it, and now this is kind of, I don't want to say the consequence, but this is the outcome of not following that nudge, you can then tap back into your intuition at that point and say, okay, now I'm in a different experience, now I'm in a different reality. What do I do now? What's my best course of action now? What are the opportunities and the possibilities now? Because there is always, at every single moment, every second of the day, there is always possibilities. There is always opportunities. And it's up to us to decide if we're going to take them or not take them. So even if you don't listen to that voice, it's not like your karma is going to rack up or something. There is no such thing, because that voice and where it is connected, which is source, God, the divine, the universe, that higher power, that higher source, is always at every single second of the day flowing you pure positive light and love. It doesn't ever go, oh, well, she didn't quite listen there, so let's not flow that to her right now. It doesn't work like that. It is always constantly available. And the reason why we feel it is not available is because we are not allowing it in, because our focus has been turned in a different direction. So this is why intuition is just like a fun thing to play with. It's not something that we have to get really serious about. And it's also not something that we have to get into this like elitist mindset around, that if you can tap into intuition, then, it makes you above anybody else. It's kind of just like, the way I like to see it is just this really cool practice that allows you to access a different part of yourself, to get access to a different viewpoint that is not available when you're in your kind of body, physical mind. And it's the voice that is going to take you on this really fun, adventurous path if you allow it to. It's that voice that is going to, or however you receive it, it's that that stream of inspiration that is going to have you talking at dinner parties saying, oh, you'll never guess what happened. Like, this happened and then this showed up. And then, it's going to create those memories and those stories. So yes, it is a very helpful spiritual tool, but it's also a really fun practice to get into. And because of that, we can let go of this idea that if we don't follow it one day, if we aren't able to tap into it, if we can't discern between that body mind and that spirit mind, then there really is no, there's no reason to beat ourselves up about it. It's just something that we get better at with practice. So that's pretty much all I wanted to cover today. Let me know if you've got any questions around, is there anything that you're struggling with around intuition and understanding it and being able to tap into it? Is there something that's just not quite clicking yet that you want a bit more guidance on? Let me know if you're watching in the replay. Drop your comments in the chat box and I will get back to them. And I'm going to be doing lots more around intuition because I feel like it seems to be a topic that I've been drawn to very much recently. So anything that I'm excited about, that's about sharing love, expansion, empowerment, consciousness, is going to be across my channels. It's going to be on my YouTube channel. It's going to be on my Instagram. So there's probably going to be a lot more coming about intuition. But I hope you've enjoyed today's live and taken something from it, learned something a bit more about intuition, or maybe even just learned to relax on it a bit and to just see it as something fun and something enjoyable. And I'm going to be doing more lives because I really enjoy coming on live. It's just seems to work with me. It's an intuitive thing. I have a few notes, a little bit of structure that helps me kind of guide the conversation. But really what I like is that going live allows me to tap in to that it allows me to practice flowing my intuitive thoughts outward rather than just sitting in meditation and listening to those thoughts as they're coming through into my head. It's also a practice for me to then be able to translate those thoughts out physically, because that's a whole nother practice, certainly for myself. And that's effectively for any of you that listen to Abraham Hicks, that have, watched anything about them, that is effectively what Esther Hicks is doing. That is exactly what she is doing. She is getting into this place where she's got no resistance. She's in complete allowance. And then what happens is the voice of consciousness, that is Abraham, which is just a collection of consciousnesses. I mean, it's when you tap into your intuition, you're tapping into Abraham, because all it is it's just this collective consciousness. We are all one, we are all connected. It's kind of all one voice effectively, but it's just your physical body and your physical self is adding an interpretation, or not adding an interpretation, but it's like adding your style to it. So the way in which Esther talks and translates Abraham will sound different to somebody else who's channeling. But and this is actually a really good way to discern between anyone that is saying that they're channeling, because you'll find a lot of stuff on YouTube, a lot of stuff on social media where people saying they are channeling a message. The way that you know whether that is really a channeled message that is coming from a higher source is, like I said earlier, is it promoting love? Is it promoting unity? Is it promoting self-worth? If it's not coming from that place. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just something to be aware of if you're following anybody, or if you're looking for messages out there that claim to be channeled messages. They won't ever have a message of doom and gloom, because there is no such thing. There will be no negativity. There might be some hard realities, but there will never be like a negative in that message. It will always be positivity. It will always be opportunity, expansion, love, empowerment. That is what you will receive. And that is why, like, Esther is so amazing at it, because she's so consistent. If you listen to Abraham Hicks videos, you find masses of them on YouTube, listen to them, and you will find the consistency in the message is so on point. And there's another person that I used to listen to as well. I can't remember his full name. Somebody called Lincoln. I can't remember his full name, but his channeling was very consistent as well. And he was quite different. So he used to have his eyes closed whilst he did it, because it kind of took out the distractions. Whereas, like, that is why Esther Hicks is quite amazing at it, actually, because she can physically interact with people whilst transmitting that message, which, well, obviously comes quite easily for her, but I find it's quite a difficult practice. So yeah, that's just a little add-on. If you're looking for finding those messages, and that's why they are such amazing messages. Like, that is why Abraham Hicks is such a massive thing, why it's so popular, is because those messages are always pure. And it's like, when you listen to them, unless you are in a place of disallowing and you're in a place where you're very resistant towards that message, like that hard love line is really not sitting right, and it's triggering you more than it is expanding you. That is why those messages are so popular, because when you hear them, it resonates with something deeper in you. It resonates with your non-physical part of you. And so again, this is how you can start to discern in your own self what those messages are like. So I'm going to wrap it up there, because I'm going to go and grab some lunch. And I hope that you enjoyed this live. Let me know in the comments. Also, let me know if there's any other topics around spirituality, around law of attraction, self-growth, personal development. If there's any other topics that you really want support on, because I'd be interested to dive into new topics. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Make sure you check out my Instagram page and my YouTube channel for lots more messages and practices and tips and information. And I will catch you in the next lives. Have a good day, YouTube and Instagram.